Welcome to the Limitless Potential podcast, where together we will dive into the personal, business, and career-rich tips, techniques, stories, and experiences of some incredibly successful and inspirational people, each with their own perspectives and journeys, and each with golden nuggets of wisdom which might just change your life. I'm Tracy Stone, and I'm a master trainer in a number of career supercharging techniques, a transformational coach, international best-selling author, inspirational speaker, and a woman discovering and evolving my very own limitless potential day by day.
I went to yoga and one you're going to stand up on your stage.
Celebrate yourself.
Spiritual things are very, very second and her.
And so once a week, each of you take.
Now I got that message and I see this happening many times again. I see it in a positive way.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Limitless Potential podcast. So today I'm really delighted to welcome Giovanna Forte, who joins us from London. As CEO of Forte Medical, Giovanna has researched, developed, and commercialised her NHS GP brother's invention, the low-cost Peezy Midstream, a world-first diagnostic tool clinically proven to reduce false positive urine specimens, contamination, and unnecessary antibiotic prescribing. Giovanna is an inventor in her own right also, having created a game designed to help children and older people with cognitive memory problems with mental arithmetic skills. She is also Vice President of the British Association of Women Entrepreneurs and is the recipient of numerous accolades and awards from multiple organisations. And here she is to talk to us today about her journey and how she taps into her own limitless potential. Welcome, Giovanna, and thank you for joining us.
Hello, Tracy. Thank you for having me.
So this is going to be a wonderful conversation. You have so many juicy things in your bio. I'm so excited to be able to share your journey with people. So to do that, Giovanna, what we're going to do, if you will, is go back to the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
No better place to start. So if we go back into childhood, because before you were this amazing CEO, entrepreneur, leader of organizations, inspirer of so many people, you were a little girl.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to grow into all of that. So let's go back there. Would you tell us a little bit, Giovanna, of what life was like for you growing up?
Well, I grew up in Hove and I'm the youngest of four. My eldest brother is 9 years older than me. My sister is 6 years older. And my brother Vincent, the inventor, is 18 months older. So we were very close. Believe it or not, I was quite a shy child. I was very quiet. And I had to learn to eat very quickly because as the last to get served, I was also the last to get seconds. And I still eat very quickly. And I'm always told off about it by my husband. I was very close to my parents, particularly my mother and my grandmother. And I was very much inspired by my parents and my grandmother because they were all entrepreneurial. They went through the war. They went through hard times. They were inventive. They were resourceful. And I think as a child, you absorb that. Mm-hmm. My elder siblings went off to school and I was the one who was at home most. And I think I absorbed a lot of that. I sit with my mother when she did the ironing and read. I was always with her. Helped her with cooking. We weren't a sitting in front of the television family. We did stuff, so I learned to cook. In fact, I was taught to iron at the age of 9 because my father ran a cafe in Brighton, a restaurant. So he would come home 2 or 3 times a day and change his shirt. And so I was taught to iron, and I remember ironing 13 shirts and they had to be folded a very particular way. And my mother came and checked them and she saw that there was a little nick here. She shook it out, sprayed it, screwed it up into a ball and gave it to me to do again.
Oh, wow.
I learned how to do things properly and that my mother was Swiss German. My father being Italian was a bit passionate and, but So in fact, so the best thing that somebody once said to me is, I never know if you're going to be passionate or efficient, which describes me pretty well, actually.
You're passionately efficient.
And efficiently passionate, yes.
So that's quite a mix, with a mum who's Swiss German and a dad who is flamboyant and Italian, you know. How did that affect the environment growing up?
Oh, it was fantastic. You know, my father we would have supper. My father would we'd go off. He was tired if he was at home for supper, because indeed in the summer he had a ice cream parlour in Brighton opposite the Old West Pier. He would leave the house at 7 o'clock in the morning. He wouldn't get back till after midnight, unless it was to change his shirt that I then had to iron. But we'd generally sit down, all of us, whoever was home, sit around the table after supper and chat. You know, so it was very convivial. We'd quite often dance or put the music up. My mother had her favourite songs, and you know, so it was very continental, and I very much enjoy that. And that's really how I brought my children up too, because I see the family table, the dinner table or the lunch table, the family meal is the family glue. That's where you find out what's been happening to somebody. If someone walks in the door and you say, "Have you had a good day?" Yes, no. If you're sitting down over a meal, it all gradually starts to come out. And that's when you find out your child is being bullied or has done this at school, or your husband has experienced something at work, or, you know, whatever it is. Food, I have to say, is probably the highlight of my life.
Oh, I love that. Tell us a little bit more about how the food factored in. So obviously the family bonded over food and kind of in that meal environment, which it sounds so idyllic, doesn't it? So tell us more about the food aspect of that.
It does. Food was, we had, you know, fish on Friday, chicken on Saturday, pasta on Sunday, and then whatever happened during the week. Normally when my father went to play golf, my mother was able to cook some of her Swiss food, like Hernley, which is a kind of little macaroni with anchovies, which she loved. Or pancakes. So we had stuff that my father wouldn't like when he wasn't around if he was playing golf. In his restaurant, it was ice cream, fish and chips. It was a proper Brighton Italian. You know, it's what we immigrant Italians are all known for. And he and his brothers had several. We had an ice cream factory in Hove. And I remember on Sundays, we used to go to church at 10 o'clock, and then we'd drop my mother home. And in those days, she handmade pasta every Sunday. And my father would take us to the factory where he sat and discussed business with his brothers over espresso. And I remember my brother Vincent and I used to go into this lift that was piled high with sort of baked cakes and things. And the whole place smelt of vanilla. And it was an old pulley lift. And we just used to go up and down, up and down, up and down until it was time to go home. And to this day, I will only eat vanilla ice cream.
Oh, that's so amazing.
I mean, yeah, I consider that to be a very, very lucky childhood.
Yes.
I probably wasn't the slimmest of children, but I was quite happy.
But you have beautiful memories of your childhood.
Yeah, very, very much so.
So take us on a little bit then in time. So what came next for you?
I went to boarding school when I was 9. I quite liked it. It was all right. Our head nun was one of those Irish nuns that people talk about being slightly deranged, which I think she was. And I left there after my mother told her she should renounce her vows. My mother was great with teachers she didn't like. She told me you have to sit with your back straight, your hands folded in your lap, and you deepen your voice and you speak very slowly. And it still works. Anyway, I was then sent to a boys' school for a year because at short notice they couldn't find an else room to go, and that was hell on earth. I was really badly bullied by those boys because I wasn't there for the cramming, which they were. And at the end of the first term, I came top at everything. When I went back for the second term, 3 of them pushed me into a corner and said, "If you do that again, you'll make our life hell. You made us look stupid, and you're a girl." And
oh, wow.
Wow, I know. And do you know what? I'd kind of forgotten about, you airbrush things like this out. It was only at the beginning of COVID, for some reason, 3 boys from that school tracked me down. Not those boys, nice boys. And they tracked me down. And I was horrified. And it all came back. And I said, "Look, we're the best women in the world. I don't actually want to be in touch with you." this is why. And they, they understood, and they disappeared off back to the ether where they came from. But then that occurred to me, because I subsequently to that ended up after my marriage broke down with a man who was very controlling and abusive. And it was like the same thing all over again. If you're successful, you're going to make me look stupid. If anything went right, he would sabotage it. And, there's this whole thing about, why do women not get as much funding as men? Why are there not many women on boards? Because men fundamentally, whether they appreciate it or not, are a bit nervous about women being clever. That's what I experienced when I was 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty shocking. I remember those boys' names, and borderline whether or not I get in touch with them. It's a long time ago, but I think this does happen to girls a lot. You don't dare to be stupid, because you might make the men look not as bright as you. And to be candid, whatever is going on between our legs, whatever our genitals, we all have parity. We are people. And This is what society has to come to understand.
And I think you've hit the nail on the head with that, and it happens over and over and again and again. And I've seen it so many times. I've felt it so many times as well, that you become, sometimes, not every time, of course, but you become afraid as a woman to shine.
Yeah.
Because when you do that, you're going to be abandoned by the man, or they're going to keep you down or warn you, or you won't get the promotion.
Yeah.
Because you're going to show them up. Now, of course, this doesn't happen everywhere.
No, but both my daughters went to co-ed primary schools, and they both asked to go to single-sex schools afterwards. And I had to move house to get them into the right schools, because they weren't going to private school like I did. I wanted them to leave school knowing what the world was like. But they both did incredibly well. And I remember when Georgia came home one day, I said, well, we're talking about women demanding equality. And I said to her, you never demand it, ever. You assume it.
I love that.
So
you're absolutely right. And you shouldn't have to ask for it. But people seem to feel they have to wait for permission. So
exactly. And this is one of my big things. Whenever I talk to, or I mentor people I talk in schools, I say, you have to give yourself permission to shine, or to do well, or to do whatever it might be, to exercise, or to do well at work, or to pass an exam. You give yourself permission, because if you don't, why should anybody else?
You're totally right.
Why should anybody else? And people, there's so much of this stuff about imposter syndrome and all this stuff that's fed to us, which if we weren't told about it, we wouldn't feel it.
You're so right.
Syndrome. I'm capable of doing this. Oh, but now I'm being made to feel guilty about being good at it. It's a nonsense.
Yeah. Something I heard once, which makes so much sense, and people will be up in arms sometimes over it, is one of the worst things you can get is a diagnosis.
Yeah, yes.
So
it's not having something wrong with you. Don't look up Google, because you'll be dead in 5 minutes.
Exactly. So, people tend to self-diagnose an awful lot of things. But if somebody kind of puts that label on you, that diagnosis, let's call it a label, when they put that label on you, like if they say to a woman, you're too smart.
Yeah, you're too, or anything. And also you need to think more about, your inner self, self, everything. There's a lot of navel gazing that goes on.
Yes.
And whilst I think one has to be self-aware, I'm aware about some of the ways I behave. I'm aware that in past relationships, I've annoyed my partner because I want attention, and that comes from my father being very busy and making him really angry so that I was in his beam. That kind of, I'm very aware of stuff like that. But you can over navel gaze. And I think people need to learn to look out a lot more than they do, because what's happening in the world around you is as important as what's going on inside your navel.
I love that. So look out.
Yeah.
Not down.
Stuff going on out there that people feel and people see. This is why we have such social inequality in this world, because everyone's looking after themselves. And you have to look after yourself, because if you're not okay, you can't look after other people. But I don't think there's enough looking after other people.
Yeah, absolutely right. So this situation in the school that you were in with the boys' school, how long did you stay in that environment?
Well, I was there for a year. They didn't come third. Well, so the first time I did well, the second time I came bottom at everything after the second term because I was so frightened, and my parents couldn't understand it. And in those days, this is the late 70s. If a girl, something happened to a girl, it was generally her fault. You know, what have you done to make the boys bully you? That kind of thing. So I didn't talk about it. The third term, they left, and I had a great time, and everything was fine. You know, I went back up in all my grades, and everything was fine, and I was happy, and it was such a relief walking back into that school and finding these three boys not there.
Thank God. And what did you love at school, and what did you hate at school?
Well, I then went on to Mayfield School for Girls, which at the time was run by nuns, who I liked very much, and in fact I'm still in touch with. When I got there, my sister, who I adore, Maria, she was head of school, head of house, prefect, head of hockey, head of netball.
Wow.
How was I going to match that? So I didn't bother. I wasn't very well behaved. I didn't really study particularly hard. I did the bare minimum because I was just happy. I was having a nice time. In fact, I went to the 30th wedding anniversary of one of my school friends on Saturday, and there were 8 of us there. We've all kept in touch. We all still see each other. I loved my school. It was great. And one of the most interesting things that it took me a long time to realize is that those nuns were the first feminists I ever met. Because between them, they were accountants, architects, lawyers, gardeners, you name it, you know, teachers. They brought us up. And the only men in the school were the groundsmen. In fact, I think we had one guitar teacher. But the whole thing was run, but the nuns ran it. And I think we used to see them doing what they wanted, how they wanted. Now, the God bit wasn't really for me, but you look at their independence and their independence of thought and the way they brought up a bunch of probably unruly girls, 400 of us, however many there were. And then you'd go home and find that your mother had to get dinner on the table for your father at a certain time. Now, what would you rather do? What life would you rather live? One of independence where you know your own mind and you can run your life, or one where you're running the life beholden to somebody else? And as I say, you have to take the God bit out of that thinking. But they were the first feminists I ever met. And I did actually point, they said to me once, and because I eventually got asked back, I went to a reunion and I met the new head teacher, Miss Beery, who's wonderful. And she said, what was it? She said, oh, you know, why don't you, how are you qualified to run a medtech business? And I said, what you mean? Because I left with virtually no qualifications, which she didn't know. I left with about 6 O levels and 1 A level. And she said, I didn't know that. I said, well, school couldn't really wait to get rid of me, but I became a secretary. And she said, oh, would you come back to the school and talk to the girls about what you can do if you don't go to university? And I said, you lot couldn't wait to get rid of me, and now you're asking me back? And I've been back 3 times now. In fact, they've even asked my daughter to go and speak. My daughter didn't go to school there. But I was very lucky to go to that school. And I wished I'd realised at the time how lucky I was. You know, I mean, private school fees in those days weren't nearly what they were now. My father sent 4 of us to private school, you know, running a cafe, fish and chip shop and you know, others with his brothers. You can't do that now. No way. But I was very lucky. And that school now is extraordinary. That the ceramics and the arts and the engineering things that school produces is just out of this world. Those girls are really lucky. And I really wish that kind of education was available to all. You know, my husband used to teach at a private school. He now teaches in the state sector. And he says it's a whole different game because those kids don't have the same start as the kids in the private sector. And in fact, when I realised this, I did go to City of London School for Girls parent event one day for my younger daughter, because she didn't get into the same school as my elder daughter, who didn't have a sibling policy. And the head teacher there said, we're very lucky because as a private school, if one of our girls wants to become a journalist, we get the editor from Telegraph in to talk to them and so on and so forth. And I sat there and I thought, yeah, it was like that at my school too. But that's not fair. What happens to the millions of school kids whose parents don't have those connections? So I came up with an idea that I still want to do when I've exited Forte Medical or when bought out or whatever, called role models. And I want to create a database of people from all walks of life who are very good at what they do, who will talk to kids in schools. So for instance, a school in Manchester, a kid might say, I want to be a bus driver, or I want to be an engineer, or I want to be an architect, or whatever it is. And they go into the database and find someone local who does that, who can come and say, yeah, you can do it.
That's amazing. What a wonderful idea.
Well, wouldn't it be great? Because, you know, next door to every school is somebody doing something that one of those kids wants to do, but no one knows they're there.
Yeah.
And I just, oh, yeah, the whole idea just gets me very excited. I would love to do that. I was talking to an exhibition designer friend of mine. He said, but gee, this is an exhibition as well. We can create mobile exhibitions that are themed around things and take them around schools and have avatars. And it's like, whoa, hang on a minute. Let's just start with the first bit. But you could do so much to tell children that they can do anything that they really want.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a big supporter of or believer in mentoring, particularly for young people, because I see so many young people in the schools shortchanging themselves out of the education and the career that would make them happy.
Yeah.
And I think it's become almost like an epidemic of people saying, I can't study, or I can't do this, or I've got this holding me back.
No intention of having a career when I was younger. I was going to get married and have kids. That's what I just, you know, I was kind of groomed by the family to do, as a lot of us were. And I became a secretary instead. And actually, that was one of the best things I ever did. And one of the slides in my story that I tell people is our secretarial duties teacher coming in and saying, you're not here to learn how to be secretaries. You are here to learn how to be the sorts of women without whom businesses fold. And I thought, wow, that's great.
That sounds powerful.
Really powerful. You know, this is Miss Moneypenny on steroids.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was great. And thanks to that school, I realized we learned shorthand typing. In fact, the same woman actually taught us, now this is so 70s, how to sit on a desk and take shorthand without showing too much leg. Because you might encourage the boss. I mean, imagine being so stupid that women have to be taught how not to excite them.
Wow.
I mean, that sums it up, doesn't it, really?
Yeah, yeah. A different era.
Whole different era. Actually, I don't think it's that different.
Well, oh God, I'd like to think it's different in that way. Maybe it's not. So what happened then? So you did this secretarial course, and actually we have that in common. So my start actually was, despite actually having the ability to do anything, I went and did a secretarial course because that's what my parents believed was the right step to take. So you do what you're told, and you start from there, which is a very different starting point.
Well, I think actually it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because it introduced me to the world of real business, real life. I went to work for bosses from whom I learned an awful lot, because in those days, a PA, I think they're executive assistants, aren't they? But personal assistant, you kind of did your boss's job for them. You absorbed what it was they had to do. And I was secretary to the director of programs at Thames Television. Then I went to work for a guy who ran an exhibition company. And things would arrive, and I would write a response and give it to him to approve, and he'd maybe make one or two changes, and that was it. And you absorbed whatever it was that they were doing, so you learnt how to run the business. And people can do as many MBAs as they like, but if they haven't actually run a business, I'm not taking their advice, because they haven't done it.
Yeah, love that. And so how long were you a secretary? Because you didn't stay there doing that. You soaked up all of that knowledge and experience.
I got married and worked with my husband, and we launched an event on the Costa del Sol. It was an investment show called the Marbella Money Show. We did the very first direct mail campaign on the Costa del Sol. for all the expatriates to come and get investment advice from, the big banks all came to exhibit, and the investment banks and so forth. We did that for 3 years. And then we ran a show that didn't work over here, that was ill-advised. And then my then husband made a couple of unfortunate decisions and lost all our money and our house when our daughter was born, eldest daughter. So we moved into a rented house in Twickenham. And he said that I would have to work because he wasn't going to earn enough money. And that was when I decided to start my own business, because so that I could look after Alessandra in my own way, in my own time, the way I wanted to. Mm-hmm. So I rang all the people I knew in the exhibition industry and said, if I provide support services like direct mail or exhibition features, would you give me work? And they all said yes. So 6 weeks before the very first BBC Good Food show, the organiser rang me and said, we've just realised we haven't got any fresh food in the BBC Good Food show. So can you help? And I said, yes. So I rang the National Farmers Union and said, there's this much space for you. Everything will get built. We won't charge you, but we need all the fresh food and everything in there. And we had meat demonstrations and vegetables. And we had everything there. So I became a kind of problem solver in that respect. And then that food from Britain, when we were demonstrating lots of stuff in Tokyo, BSE came cropped up while all our stuff was being freighted over from the UK. And so my solution was to exhibit British sausages and Scotch whiskey, flambe the sausages and whiskey, and tell the Japanese world this is a big thing in London. So problem solving for events and so forth became my métier, I suppose. And then that evolved into PR. Somebody asked me if I did PR, and I said yes, but I didn't really know what it was. So I asked the question of my then husband, and he told me, and I said, we're pitching PR for the show next week. He said, well, we don't do PR. And I said, well, why not? And we won the pitch. And that went so well that I then went to work by myself. We then parted company. And I focused on PR, and a lot of the exhibitors and the visitors came to me. So I focused on architecture and design, and it was a world that I knew nothing about, but then absolutely loved. In fact, I've got such a chair fixation now that when my husband and I were looking at wedding venues, the guy showed us the chairs that they have, and I went, those are made by G. Burgess in Feltham. And he looked and he went, how did you know?
That's amazing.
Bit nerdy. And I do, in fact, I think, someone put a thing up on Facebook of their baby, and I just said, I can see a Barcelona chair. So, I discovered things that I loved that I didn't know I loved. And that's what I like about life. If you embark on something new, you discover something new, and you discover different things about yourself.
Love that. That's amazing. And you were so brave taking this on, thinking, okay, I need to do something. Let's say yes to the PR. We don't even know what PR really is yet, but let's say yes and figure it out and make it happen and do it really, really well. And you did.
Let's say yes, you never know, do you?
Yeah.
You'll spend the rest of your life. One of the ways I make big decisions, any big decision, is when I get to the end of my life, will I look back and wish I'd done it? The answer is yes, I wish I'd done it. Give it a whirl.
That's a good test. That's a really good test. So if you look back, would you wish that you had or hadn't?
Yeah. And what's the worst thing that can happen? It doesn't work. So what? Exactly.
So what? Nobody has died as a result of it. Let's assume. You move on and you do the next thing.
Exactly.
You try the next option.
You move on to the next. Yeah, and life is full of options. So look at the one you like best and seize it.
I love that. So what came next in the journey?
Then I was doing very well with my PR business, Forte Communication. I had first floor office on the corner of Wardour Street and Old Compton Street in Soho. It was very ab-fab. My only non-design client was Luxusova vodka, which I launched into the UK. Polish potato vodka, by the way, very good. So the office door was propped open with cases that were sent out to journalists. Some of them didn't make it to journalists, but most of them did. But oddly, friends would start turning up at 5 o'clock in the afternoon saying, hi. They
know
were
what they were looking for.
yeah, exactly. They were ab 5 days, but great fun, really good fun. And then my brother rang me up and said, women keep coming to my surgery complaining about having to pee into a little bottle when I ask them for a urine sample, and then they have to come back because the result's not right, and I think there's contamination in the sample, and I'm really fed up with being shouted at about dirty hands. What do I do? And I said, make something, because he was always making things when we were little. So he did. He came up with what is now Peezy Midstream. He won an award and said he was going to go and talk to all the journalists at the award and being a PR. I said, no, you can't do that until you've got it and you've done it and you've made it. Will you help him? Yes, I said I would help him. And so we both put, I mean, I was making a lot of money in PR in those days because you just had retainers and you know, it was profitable business. So we each put 50 grand in, and we got cracking, and we got patents, and we got prototypes made. We explored. Now, we were so ahead of our time. This is 2002. We spent a lot of money exploring cornstarch polymer instead of plastic, because we wanted the Peezy to be flushable or compostable, or, you know, not have an impact on the environment. Mm-hmm. And we tried, but it was still too novel. And to this day, it's too novel. I had a conversation with a potential investor earlier who said, we'd rather that, you know, you weren't using plastic, you were using something sustainable. Well, there isn't as yet a polymer for the medical profession, for medical devices that is appropriate, because, for instance, had we used the cornstarch polymer, we would have had to coat it with something so that the starch didn't leach into the urine and impact the sample. So there are all these, you know, it's not as easy as just making something out of a sustainable polymer. There are many, many more implications in the medical world that you have to consider. But then we spent 10 years doing R&D. We made prototypes, we tested them, we brought them back, we improved them, we got feedback from patients and nurses and doctors. And it was 10 to 12 years before we launched the finished version, which we have now. And we launched into the NHS. HCA was our first customer. And they said, that, you know, they own the Princess Grace and Portland Hospital and those. And they said, we simply cannot ask our patients to soil their hands. So that was the reason they bought it. Then we started to discover the clinical benefits, the reduced contamination, the reduced false positives. But the problem with the NHS, there are two big problems. One is that the budgets are siloed. So the budget that pays is not the budget that saves. The budget that saves is the lab. Now, the labs are largely these days commissioned privately, but they are paid per sample. So if they're getting fewer samples because of less contamination and fewer false positives, they are given less money. So both of these, the procurement and the labs, both say, no, we're not doing this because it's not in our vested interest to do that.
Wow.
So the purchasing systems in the NHS and the lab systems are geared towards keeping those systems alive rather than keeping patients well. And that has to change.
That's just mind-boggling, isn't it? And it's so believable.
It's shocking. It's shocking. You know, and you know, I've had a GP say to me, I've had to see this woman 3 times and she's pregnant because her sample's contaminated. And it's dangerous. You know, you can't give pregnant women antibiotics all the time because you can create gestational diabetes in the woman and in the child. It can give the unborn propensity to obesity later in life. There are all sorts of outcomes that come from that. And so getting the right urine sample, when we do come back into the UK, Peezy will probably cost about £3, but a retest is about 10. So you've already got the saving there. And even if you know, the upshot is cost neutral, well, the patient is better. There are over 130,000 unplanned admissions of elderly people from untreated urinary tract infection every year that cost the NHS over 400 million to treat. And yet
those are just incredible numbers.
Those are incredible numbers, yeah. And yet you say, use this Peezy. Oh, we don't need that. We'll just do it again if it's not work. It's just urine. Now, urine is like blood. It has diagnostic parity. So why do you not treat it like blood? Why do you not treat it with the same respect in collection and make sure you get the right sample? Mm-hmm. We've now come up with, well, I went to see a professor down in the University of Surrey years ago with Peezy Midstream, and he said, I need first stream because I've come up with this very new prostate and bladder cancer test, and the protein that will identify that early diagnosis is heavy. So it sinks to the base of the bladder and the top of the urethra, and it comes out in the first concentrated 8 to 10 millilitres of urine. I need that first 8 to 10 millilitres. And I said, we can do that. So Owen, who works with me, and I went back to the office, and he went, how do you think we can do that? And I said, well, we do this, 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 and this. So we cut out bits of paper and stuck things together and went, yeah, it works. So then we made some more prototypes, and we had an intern working with us who also got it to work, and he did a big study on why you need first stream urine and what it's for and what it does and the biomarkers in it and the proteins and everything else. And we had that document, but we've never, as an SME, been able to raise enough money to get the resource to commercialise that. Last 2 years ago, an industry partner, Owen Mumford, which is a very successful British company, medical device company, they invested in us. And a diagnostic company in the States said we need first stream urine. And they said, oh, we only got midstream. And I said, no, look. And we showed them. And they've now licensed it from us. And they are finishing the commercialization and development, and will then run the sales. And we'll get royalties from that. So, that's another, yes, I think we can do that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And you go and give it a go. Now, what was the worst that can happen? I'm sorry, Prof, we didn't manage to do it. We thought we could. You gave it a go. But we have, and we can now help with the early diagnosis of cancer for prostate, testicular, pancreatic, and even there's research going on for lung and breast cancer in urine.
That's incredible.
It is incredible.
And
yeah.
these are such huge strides in diagnosis.
Yeah.
And you're a part of that.
Precision diagnosis. And when COVID hit, actually we had, after so many years, started to get an uplift in sales to the NHS of Peezy Midstream, and then COVID came along, no point of care testing, zilch, and the few sales we had just disappeared, a tumbleweed going through our accounts. And so I sat and thought, right, what do we do? Let's change the business model. First of all, let's change the business model and focus on licensing and royalties, which is also how licensing Peezy First Stream came about. And we'll find distributors for Peezy Midstream, because we can't raise the money to do it ourselves. So we now have to raise less money because we're partnering with big distributors, and Thermo Fisher Scientific, which is probably one of the biggest life science distributors in the world, have taken us on to the States. So that's good. But also a home test. Now you can get home urine tests where you have a stick at home and you dip it, and then you download an app for about £10, and the app will read your thing, and then you send the result to your GP, or it says go to your GP, because it won't actually tell you what's wrong, it'll just say you have an infection. So what I want to do is, with Peezy at home, is deliver the midstream into the lab-friendly tube. If it's positive, it goes into a prepaid envelope to your nearest lab, which cultures it, sends the result to your GP or prescribing pharmacy, and the targeted antibiotic is delivered to you at home. Because broad-spectrum antibiotics that very often don't work, it's all very hit and miss, they are the core, they're behind the rise of antimicrobial resistance, for which there is no cure, no vaccine. If we can make sure that women are not on the front line of that AMR issue, then I think we've done a really good job.
Absolutely. And the supply of the antibiotics is, if that's so linked to a kind of oversupply of that to people because of the faults in diagnosis, the false positives, or the lack of testing and just going ahead with antibiotics, have you been able to kind of measure that? We
need to measure it. We've been trying to get some trials going with that, but at the moment we have no UK stock at all. It's all in the States where it's selling, because the demand is fairly huge. But we do want to do that test. What we do know from the National Institute of Health Research is that 50% of the global rise of antimicrobial resistance has a urinary source. 50% of the global rise, and 47% of the blood infections that cause sepsis have a urinary source. And this is because those urine samples are not being collected accurately. We have the only device in the world that does that.
That's
Made in Kent.
Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really, really proud of what we've achieved. We just now need to scale it, and you get the two professors that run the Women's Research Centre at UCLH, I asked them if they would do a study with Peezy on antibiotics and urinary tract infection. They wrote back to me and said it's not a priority.
Mm.
Now, if they pins and needles every few weeks, I bet it would be a bloody priority.
Exactly. But what we all learn over time is that what is a priority for anybody in any business in any area is what gets measured. So to them, the only thing...
appointments are for urinary tract infection. And they are most likely won't get, when I had a urinary tract infection, was given a 3-day course of antibiotics. They didn't work. And I asked my doctor, I took her a Peezy sample and said, can you culture this? And she said, that's not what we do. That's not guidelines. I said, no, it's not guidelines. I know the guidelines backwards, but I'd like you to culture it. I'll carry on taking painkillers until that's done. No, she gave me a 3-day course of a broad spectrum antibiotic, which didn't work. I went back after 3 days with another Peezy sample. Please culture this. No, I don't need to. Here's a longer course of the same antibiotic. I ended up with borderline sepsis in A&E.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. I was sitting there shaking like this, just and my partner said, but it's not cold. What's wrong with you? So he rang my brother, who just said, take her to A&E.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's amazing. There's so many areas that this affects. So it's not just the antibiotics, it's the whole outcome on the patient.
Women's health and well-being. You can't work if you've got to go to the loo every 2 minutes and try and pee pins and needles for something that's not actually there because you have an infection. It's just not right. And I think women's health generally is massively overlooked, which is why there's a huge rise in female-led health tech SMEs. Which I'm thrilled about, really thrilled about. And these are well-qualified, bright women who are far better educated than I am, who are coming along and changing the whole thing, the whole landscape, which is brilliant.
But you're a huge part of all of this. I mean, what you have created there, your brother's design and your commercial know-how and your design factors in it, it's just incredible, isn't it?
Well, I think, I don't know if it's incredible. If I wouldn't have done it, someone else would have done it. It was there to be done.
But you did.
I picked up the baton and run with it, yeah. Now I want to hand it over to someone else and go do something else. I want to go and run role models.
You did. So if you could get a message to anybody in the NHS, who would it be? Not necessarily name, but, role. And what message would you give them about this?
First of all, it would be the head of the maternity transformation program. If you want to treat women properly during pregnancy, take a proper urine sample and don't give them antibiotics they don't need. There are about 6 million prenatal urine samples tested every year. And imagine between 15 and 30% of those are unreliable. And the other thing is hygiene. We're all told to wash our hands all the time, and yet women are still given a tiny tube to soil their hands with urine in order to give specimen that they may not be diagnosed from. That would never happen with blood, and yet blood and urine have diagnostic parity. I'm not a scientist, but that's not rocket science.
You're so right.
So it would be maternity and also elderly, because the elderly suffer from urinary tract infections a lot. And if they have any cognitive difficulties, it exacerbates that condition. I knew with my mother, she had vascular dementia, and the carers would phone up and say, your mother's behaviour has become very challenging. And my sister or I would say, she's got a UTI, get the doctor in. And with Peezy, you can hold it in place so that you get the right sample. And it's a lot kinder and more dignified. No elderly lady wants to be sitting there with legs akimbo with somebody sitting there with a tube. No one wants to do that. How dare they be treated like that?
When there are better options.
When there are better options, yeah. So elderly and prenatal are our main targets. If it then transfers into primary care, that's good. But GPs are so resistant, and the CCGs, rather, I should say, I think they're called something else now, are so resistant to spending money on preventative measures, because also it is my understanding, not making any claims here, that the pharma companies have great influence over policy, and they would rather NHS money is spent on cure than prevention.
Yes.
That is what they provide.
And this is a worldwide issue, isn't it? In all of the medical fields, or a lot of the medical fields. That
in the States, Medicaid, they reward physicians for using preventative practice.
Yeah.
So Peezy Midstream in the States has a reimbursement code, it's called a HCPCS code, that will reimburse between $48 and $63 for a $4 device. Because Medicaid says that means we don't have to pay for more lab fees, more visits, chronic conditions. So let's reward the physician for doing something that stops all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
So
that
the
is what
data,
the NHS should think.
but the data that you've got from there, has that been able to help sell the story, the need for this here or elsewhere as well? Because clearly they've got data that is enabling them to cost calculate what the benefit is to them and pay that extra number of dollars to encourage the use of this.
Problem is the National Health Service isn't national. It's run by a number of different trusts for acute care and CCGs, whatever they're called now, for primary care. It's not joined up. So there's no one place to go. You know, I've spoken to health ministers. I've spoken to Lord Pryor when he was chairman of the NHS. Shrug. What are we going to do about that? It's a big job and no one wants to do it. So you have to go from, you know, trust to trust to trust to trust to trust and persuade them, and you know, and you can go to the media and they can tell the story. I've told this story so many times and everyone just kind of shrugs. I even had one midwife years ago say to me, well, if everyone uses this, it's going to make you rich, isn't it? Oh, do you say that to the guy from Pfizer who comes around to flog you drugs? No, bet you don't.
Wow.
That's
just wow. I mean, the words fail, and words don't often fail me.
I know, I can imagine.
That is quite something. So what are the next steps for you with this? Well,
we are fundraising. We're looking for $500,000 because now I've remodeled the business into a licensing royalty model with distribution partners. We don't need a big team. We don't need a big marketing campaign and all of this. We need enough to support our partners. So we want £500,000 to do that. And also we now, thanks to Brexit, we have to spend about £30,000 on regulatory matters so we can sell in the EU. We have to embark on all of that. So we want £500,000 so we can scale the business and then either sell the business as a whole or sell the different devices to whoever wants them. But the joy of what we do is that our devices are required globally. There's nowhere in the world where they won't be needed.
Exactly.
So, you know, the company will be worth a lot of money. And as long as we can hang on in there and it's worth a lot of money, I might be able to own my own house because I'm renting now. You know, I'm 59 years old and I'm still renting because everything has gone into this business. And I don't mind that because it's a good business and I have a nice home.
Well, that's clear passion and conviction in your purpose and in what you're doing.
Yeah, I know. I've made many, many mistakes in my life, but this is not one of them.
Love that. That's very, very nice. So what other things are you into? You know, we know that you are also involved in a number of different networks. Why are you involved in these networks and how, and what does that bring to you and what do you bring to them?
Oh, gosh. I found the British Association of Women Entrepreneurs through a lunch I went to run by a lady, Val Corbett, who campaigns for prisoners and fair treatment of prisoners. And it was a charity started by her late husband, Robin Corbett. She has lunches and she just invites interesting women to come to lunch and discuss stuff. And she has fascinating speakers. In fact, I met Michael Palin at one of her speakers, at one of her lunches. And I got him to say hello to my other half, who is called Dickie. So we have a lovely little vignette of Michael Palin saying, hello, Dickie.
This is so iconic.
I know. Anyway, Lady Val is fantastic. So I can recommend her lunches for women. And she gets everybody to move around after the first course or second course. And there was a woman, Patricia Rochford, who stood up and just pointed at me. I didn't know her. She said, you come here and sit next to me. I was like, what have I done? Oh my God, the nuns reappeared. So I went to sit next to her and we got on like a house on fire, and she took me to a Bowie lunch and I liked it so much I joined. I mean, the Lady of Our lunches you can go to if you want, there's nothing to actually join. And I've been back to a few of those too. But Bowie you join and you meet, I mean, we had a talk the other day from a woman who runs a company called Amicable, which helps people get divorced amicably. You have, there's a couturier, there are lawyers, there are accountants, there are craftspeople, there are jewelers, all sorts of women from all walks of life. It's fascinating. There's another organisation I belong to called the Entrepreneurs Network, 10 entrepreneurs, and they run the entrepreneurs, the APPG, All Party Parliamentary Group for Entrepreneurs. And they have a female founders group, which I go and comment at. And my biggest contribution there, I suppose, is to say that whilst I love female networking groups, I really don't approve of female awards and female investments, exclusively, because we need to be judged and assessed shoulder to shoulder with our male counterparts. Why are we being partitioned? Oh, those poor people without penises, let's put them over there and treat them differently to the rest of us because we rule the world. It's a nonsense. And I get quite cross about that. Angel Academy is a female founded investment group, but they include men in their panel and everything else. So it's not exclusively women, but they do promote women entrepreneurs. That I like very much. And then the Global Woman, which is where we met. Now, how did I meet Global Woman? It was through the Entrepreneurs Network. That's right. And the female founder group I went to, Mirella, who runs the Global Woman, came and sat next to me. And she said it was serendipity because we got on like a house on fire, and she invited me to her lunch a couple of days later, which is where I met you.
Absolutely.
So everything leads, and aren't women just great fun? We're sassy, we're clever, we're smart, we're funny, and we get on with each other. We don't have this big competitive streak. I'm sure I'm better than you. We all just go, all right, well, I do that too. Or can I help you with this? Can I help you with that? Within 10 minutes of walking into Global Woman, Sylvia, who sat next to me, has introduced me to prospective investor. These networks are fantastic.
Mm.
So,
right.
I bring them whatever I can bring to them, and it's really introductions and encouragement and
yes. But I'm totally with you when you say that this must not be at the cost of differentiating women from men in terms of business.
Yeah.
It's okay. I mean, women are different to men, and that's
we have different skill sets, but that doesn't mean anyone's not as strong or clever as the next person.
And I completely agree with you that everybody should be judged on their merits. So there shouldn't be this need that there is at the moment to have a slate for any job that you need to have X percent of women on the slate. It should be the right people, but what the women's networks are doing to help with that is to give women the confidence that they maybe don't yet have to put themselves up there for it.
It's been chipped away from them by the media that keeps telling us that we should look like this or behave like that.
Exactly. But it's not about getting an unfair advantage, and it should never become about having an unfair advantage, a positive discrimination of
the best projects will have a decent mix of estrogen and testosterone.
Yeah. Said like a true scientist. As you said, you're not a scientist, but yet you kind of are with what you're doing. So what's coming next for you? Tell us just as we kind of wrap around to the end.
I would like to somehow exit the business but remain on the board. I have a substantial salary raise I'd like back. I'd like to buy my own house. And I would like to embark on role models that I described earlier. I would really love to get that going. I would like to commercialize my game, my maths game, because that would be great as an app and as an analog game for children and older people. And there's just so much to do in life. And I want to get on with it. I've been doing this for 17 years. And I think, I'm the getting things done person. I'm the getting things set up person. I've got this company set up now, and I've got it right on the edge of its springboard. And someone else needs to come in and push the springboard and scale it, because I don't have that skill. I know my strengths and weaknesses, and I'm not the scale up person.
But you bring such beautiful energy to all of the work that you do. It's so clear to see.
Life is good.
Life is good. So as a last question, Giovanna, if you were to push yourself forward in time, let's pick an age. Let's say you are on your 85th birthday and you are able to travel back to the Giovanna of today.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want her to tell you that she is most proud of you for?
Spending time with her grandson.
Lovely.
I just think, I have a 1-year-old grandson. This made me quite teary. And he is the apple of my eye.
Oh, my darling.
Yeah.
That is beautiful.
When you're a working mother, you don't spend time with your children when they're little. And that's what I would do. In fact, I would say to any mother, if you can avoid working for the first 3 years of your child's life, just bloody don't work, because you don't get that back.
I think that's really sound advice.
Yeah.
If it's possible, do it.
And those are very precious years.
Yeah.
I mean, I've watched Nino start to walk, start to crawl. I missed that with my children. I wasn't there. I was out working.
Mm.
And what a privilege it is to craft the next generation. Why are women fighting to go back to work? It's only 3 years.
I love that. And I couldn't agree with you more. And you don't get that time back. It's not an opportunity that comes back again later. You can't have a do-over. You can't make up the time.
No, you can't.
So if you can make it possible, and so many people...
I can't believe you made me cry, Tracy.
I have magic powers.
Yeah, I would definitely, if I'm on red alert because my daughter's moving boat. She lives on a houseboat this week. So I will spend more time with him. And it's just a joy. It's exhausting. Oh my God. I mean, thank God women have children early in life. By the time she arrives to pick him up, I'm just comatose on the sofa.
So enjoy it while it's all there, and your 85-year-old self is going to be very proud of you for taking the time to enjoy it now with your grandson and make the most of all of that.
Well, my grandson is going to make me a Zimmer frame with a wine glass holder on one hand and a cigarette and ashtray on the other, because by then it won't bloody matter and I can do what I like. And I'm going to toddle along doing this and having a drink and chatting with my friends.
You can keep this podcast as evidence of that request for him, so he knows what's expected in the years to come.
He'll be going, oh no, that's not what you're supposed to do. Here are your dementia tablets.
That is incredible. Giovanna, you put so much beautiful energy into everything that you do. It's just so lovely to have this time. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and your story with us. And the little tear or two in there at the end, all beautiful. Thank you.
Well, I think you're incumbent now to provide Kleenex for every one of your interviewees. You can brand them as well. There we go. There's an idea.
The podcast that makes you cry.
The tear cast.
That's fantastic.
Thank you very much.
I really appreciate it. What a wonderful conversation with Giovanna. And thank you to everybody listening in, and we wish you well. We wish you limitless potential, and we will welcome you back for another episode of more inspiration, more stories, more journeys, maybe the odd tear, and more limitless potential. See you next time.